Thank you all for being here. Didn't expect so many people, really, attending the lecture, so I was a bit more nervous than entering the room. Well, you know, it's always difficult to, when talking about your work, to put a title to a lecture. I used somehow these two words, persistence and transformation, because I think that it's a good title to define well the way we work, the work we try to achieve, or the things we try to achieve. I mean, you are gonna hear me to repeat these words during the next hour or so. My aim today is to explain you what matters to us when designing, when thinking about architecture. I think most of you are students, so my commitment would be to explain you how we work, but it's impossible to explain you how we work. I just can't explain you the things we have in mind and what we try to get when designing something or when talking about architecture. I think that's important when we talk about architecture. And let me just explain you a little bit how we started our office. I think it's important because the way we started the office explains the way we work too. So sorry if I talk a little bit about our lives, because I think explains a lot of things. I mean, my partner he is Italian. We met in the south of Spain, in Sevilla, working in an office, and we weren't soulmates. We didn't expect to work together. I mean, that just happened to us. I never expected to work in Barcelona when I finished my studies. But, well, we knew each other. We started to work together, and since the very beginning, we had to talk about what matters to you, what's architecture to you, what do we do together, and how do we do it. And that was important because somehow that kind of approach, recognizing that we knew nothing about what was architecture for us, took us to a point where we had to discuss about everything, about what an Italian and Spanish working together can propose in places we don't know, and with clients we don't know, and how do we do competitions together? I mean, that's why, well, maybe that's why the word persistence makes sense, but that's why since the very beginning, we started to talk about words that probably your teachers explain you constantly. I mean, maybe words like how to be specific in the place where you work. I mean, how to be specific with your design, with your proposal, how to react to the context, how to understand the context, how the building or your small design can work within an ensemble of things, make sense, what makes sense. So we started talking about these words in our office. And there was a moment somehow, I mean, this has been evolving during the last years because, well, now we are not a young office. We already have an history of 20 years, but that process of continue asking ourselves, what's the kind of architecture that we want to do and how we want to make it together, helped us to develop a kind of, I wouldn't say language or theory, but at least a kind of approach that I think it's linked with these two words, persistence and transformation, or with something that we like, or that joins both words, I mean, which is the word continuity. We work on continuity constantly with the places where we work. As we started to work from Barcelona, competing in many different places, we always had to think how to make it, yeah, as I said, in places that we didn't understand completely, and how to approach those places, being conscious that we need to improve those places as architects. And this idea of working on continuity with the places where we work it's always, and it's currently very important in our practice. We are conscious about the places where we work. We want to understand them. We want to get to the essence of those places. And we want to approach those places not just from the physical somehow approach. I mean, to work well in a plot, in a place, is not just to understand the physical context, is to understand the character, the atmosphere of the place, is to understand what's going around it. But it's true that I was talking with Mark before, before the lecture, and when you do a competition, we mostly do competitions. No? The way we get commissions nowadays is doing competitions. So when you do a competition, you don't have time to think about, to understand everything. You don't understand everything. If I do a competition, if I had the chance to do a competition in Budapest, I couldn't understand Budapest and Hungary and the neighborhood. I just could focus probably in this small piece of land where I have to put something or I have to build something. So what we try is basically to understand the big word would be the essence of the place, but the reality is we try to understand somehow certain characteristics, certain elements. Sometimes we try to understand the small history of those places to help us design something with some meaning. Meaning means to propose a design that can continue the history of that place in a coherent way. This is what we try to get somehow when designing. So that means that sometimes what interests us the most are the small histories or the small elements of the places, not just the big history. We were talking that we are just architects. We are not trying to change anything with the work we do. We don't try to change the society. We don't try to propose changing the city or the neighborhood. We just try to solve certain requirements in the best possible way, trying to improve the place where we work. Our commitment is to leave a better place after us than before us. And sometimes in our designs you can see, well, this was an extension of a castle for a music school in Germany. There are sometimes elements that belong to the language of the existing, sometimes that we use as tools to help us to compose a design. Sometimes it's about the meaning of elements that we find out in the places where we work, like for example here in Kortrijk in Belgium. We need help, but most of the times we don't focus about the complexity of the places where we work. We focus, or we try to use, I would say, the small history of these places. I think it's going to be much easier when showing you the projects and the buildings I'm going to show later, but it's about understanding the context, not just with its entire complexity. Just focus about what you consider it's the most important for you. Of course, it's always a personal approach. It's not I think this profession, it's beautiful because you all are architects, so each of us has the reasons and the tools to do something good, completely different than the job done by others. So we don't have the right answer for anything. And that's the beauty of our profession. What I'm going to show you, or what I understand as the small history that really addresses the design, and what matters to me is different than what matters to you probably, and is different from your approach. But I think that the message to all of you from my side is that our commitment is try to find out which are these histories, to understand that working mostly in Europe means to understand the uniqueness and the singularity of the places where we work. Each region is different, each city is different, each country is completely different. We share common values somehow, and these common values help all of us to address the design in a certain way. So think about our work as the work done by somebody trying to understand not the complexities of everything, or not the abstract concepts surrounding the places, just focusing about the basics. And I think our work is about that, focusing about the basics, focusing about how to design something with the right scale, the right proportions, that could fit well in a place because there is certain meaning in that place. There was somebody before us. We are just another layer, and after us, this place needs to be better, but somebody's gonna come back here and it's gonna change it. So that's important to me to transmit it today too. With our work, we are not the ending point of anything. Somebody's gonna come later, is gonna change completely what we did. So, well, we will develop this during the lecture. And that's why it's about persistence and it's about transformation. Somebody's gonna transform it after us too, as we are transforming it with our work. I wanted to talk about this we're gonna overview 5 projects, 3 built projects and two projects that are or on hold or in development. Well, as I said, we started our practice in Barcelona and we started competing, making competitions around Europe. This is one of the good things about being in Europe. We have the chance to do competitions in many, many different places. Really, the place for us never was an obstacle. We always thought that we were Europeans, so our common ground is Europe. So since the very beginning for us to compete in Italy or in Germany or in Sweden or in this case, Switzerland wasn't an obstacle. And I don't feel that I have more opportunities when I compete in Spain than when I compete in other countries, because I think that we share the same values. So when I propose something in this case in Zurich, I always thought that, well, they're gonna understand it because, I mean, this is not the same, it's the same, almost the same place. No? This was a select, well, this competition was a restricted competition. They selected us in 2014. The goal was to do the extension of the Tanzhaus. Something I didn't mention before is that I'm going to show you 5 projects, very different in terms of context. I wanted to show projects that are not just in nice historic centers or just in nice or in beautiful spots, because I think that the goal is to transmit how we approach this idea of context, how to be specific, how to work on continuity in this context, in contexts that are really completely different, let's say that, because just showing you beautiful spots would lead you to think that, well, maybe these guys are lucky because they always work in, I mean, medieval historic centers, and that's not the case. And just to discuss about what means context. So, well, Zurich, of course, is a privileged city, but it's a privileged city not just maybe because what we still have in mind when I say Zurich, we all think about the lake, this super nice, rich buildings, the hotels. I mean, we think about lawyers, we think about rich people moving around the lake, no, somehow, nice cars, whatever. But this is Zurich too. Well, this is the main river, the Limmat, and this is a bath area. I mean, it's called the Klosterfarberg. And this was somehow the landscape or the context where we had to do the extension. I mean, in fact, this building that you see on the right side, this is the former place where the Tanzhaus was. I mean, so we had to do the extension of these facilities. Well, you can recognize, I mean, this is Gigon's Guyer here. This is a building that you will see later, this concrete building here. And somehow this is the neighborhood. So this is the context. It's a context where the main actor is not this building or this building. It's true that there is a lot of elements, like this is the viaduct for the trains, for example. The bath area, it's like a kind of, it's a nice ensemble, but there's nothing that really marks up somehow strongly the site. So basically, the program, well, the brief of the competition asked to basically to do a hall for 150 people, 3 classrooms for dancers, basically. This is a building for dancers. A small program for offices, the wardrobes, and a public area. It's a public building. It's not a private building, it's a public building. Public is a word that has really shaped our approach to architecture, and since the very beginning. We mostly do public competitions. So public for us has a real meaning. We truly believe that when you do a public building, the building needs to propose something to the city. The building needs to put city as a concept on top of whatever you do. So how do you start designing? How do you start thinking about the project? So, well, this is the model that we submitted to the competition. I mean, there was an office. I mean, this is the building I showed you in the slide before. I mean, this big building here, an office building with some facilities of the Tanzhaus. This is another building, a housing building here. This is a kindergarten, an elementary school. There is a viaduct here, the bath area. So we had the freedom to build whatever. Really, we were lucky because the brief described this area as a land of opportunity in Zurich. We could build almost freely because certain conditions that was allowing us to almost achieving a volume like this one. So, well, design means for us, in this case, just to think about, well, in front of a river, maybe it makes sense to put in value the connections of this space, try to link the canal of the river with the street, how to connect them, how to make a nice pathway close to the canal in front of the river, and reflect about these buildings here. Now, how we started to think immediately about, okay, imagine the kids moving along the pathway, going till the offices, people from the offices gathering somewhere in front of the housing, the people of the housing trying to avoid the kids or trying to play with the kids. I mean, we suddenly understood the brief as an opportunity to build a small community, building a kind of space that could help them to achieve a public space somehow. So on the basis of this project, it's not about, since the very beginning, it was not about how to achieve a very expressive shape, how to be really shocking with the design. It was about to propose a place. Because if you read the brief from that point of view, school, apartments, offices, all in the same place at the same time, that sounds like a very nice starting for something. And the starting point was this plot, our plot. So, well, this is a drawing of how the ensemble works, no? And I think it's important because we were conscious about these words ensemble. We had to fit something in between these 3 buildings. We had to propose something we could fit well with them. We could understand well how to link them. So our building had to link these 3 volumes. So we were conscious that we couldn't compete against them somehow. We needed to propose something maybe less visible, maybe less trying to reduce the scale, because we wanted to be really conscious about this word ensemble. And you start looking at the drawing here, characterized by this kind of geometry or gestures or whatever. So, well, in the plan, you see that basically the shaping plan is quite small. I mean, this isn't a small building, I should say. I mean, this is less than 2,000 square meters. So it's not about the scale of the building or its massing. It's about, in this case, I mean, understanding the context from a wider point of view. So how to fit this and this volume, enabling the buildings that were surrounding us to work together, because we wanted to propose a space that could make them work together. So basically, in plan, I mean, you can see this is the base area, the canal, and how of this building, it's, I mean, fit in the neighborhood. Just trying to get enough public space in front of it, trying to reduce its footprint as much as possible, trying to fit into the ensemble as much as possible, reducing the scale. I mean, that's why the building is stepped back here, and trying to, I wouldn't say disappear, but trying to, I mean, not compete with the others. And again, translated by this language, these triangular shapes. And why? Did you think we were, I mean, when we approached to the site and we saw the river and we saw the neighborhood, we saw this area really as a landscape. We thought, okay, this is a palimpsest. No, this is a lot of things all together, and they are composed in a kind of, there wasn't a reference, a clear reference. It was an ensemble of things. I wanted to become part of the landscape. In this case, we understood the context as not as a number, a certain number of physical things that were addressing the design in a way or in a certain way. The landscape, this idea, this mix of industrial warehouses, housing, nature, they were all somehow working together, and we wanted to fit something that understood this idea of landscape. So we wanted to become part of this landscape. Characterized by these triangular shapes. Why? You will see it later, but if you look at this landscape, it's almost a kind of infrastructure. When there are this viaduct, for example, with these industrial shapes, the trains, the warehouses with the repetition of elements that, because they were industrial facilities. There is a kind of sense of, infrastructure around the site. So we wanted to get something that could be rooted in this, with this approach somehow. Something that follows that logic. Because for us, it was important to follow that logic, because that was really, we thought that would allow us to achieve something with meaning in this place, following the same logic. We weren't following somehow the logic of the materiality or the logic of the scale or whatever. We were following these unconscious rules that are always guiding the places that we visit or that we experience. Of course, there is a desire, an obsession as architects for doing these walls in this way. We tested many ways of doing the walls. I mean, just 2 walls. We had the opportunity to build 2 walls in Zurich. We were lucky. And we wanted to do the nicest walls in Zurich. So there are personal obsessions here. I mean, we like this kind of geometries that from a first point of view, we can't justify. I mean, we just wanted to do triangles, somehow, because we thought that maybe this approach was very expressive, was simple, could solve issues like we couldn't open up the facades more than 50% because we were facing south, so we had to reduce the exposure of windows towards south and not opening the windows more than 50%. We had to achieve something that could work well with the material, with the concrete. There was we were doing the extension of a dance house, so there were more metaphors. No, we always joke, I always joke with this. I mean, dancer never puts the feet in the ground like you put your feet. So this wall couldn't put the feet on the ground in the same way you put them. No? So we wanted to achieve something that dealt well with gravity or with mass. So there were a lot of personal desires here. And we were looking for arguments and elements that could justify this obsession of achieve a kind of artificial landscape that could work well in the context and could work well following the same rules that we understood were the main values of this context. This took us to a position where we had to reduce materials, we had to reduce elements of language as much as possible. Because we wanted to express just that, just two walls and the openness, the geometry, that like a viaduct, like one of the bridges that are crossing the river. We just wanted to be part of that. And we wanted to link the three buildings on top of us. And so we reduced everything to a minimum. I mean, this is a detail of one of the pillars or the columns that are characterized in the wall, just concrete. Technically, we developed the project in a way that we could use thermal concrete in order to reduce layers, more materials, just attaching the frames of the windows in the simplest way we found out, just to get this kind of expressiveness, let's say that. Why we wanted to do this in this way? We wanted to, it was a public building, so we wanted to get that attention of the visitors. I mean, we wanted to shout. We wanted to shout really to the people, hey, we are here. We want you to be inside the building. A public building needs to attract people somehow, needs to attract visitors, citizens. We want them to be in the building, beyond its dimensions, beyond its scale. And we wanted to propose a place. We wanted to propose a place on top where people could gather. So it was not just about certain obsessions that we had, of course, as architects. It was about trying to get that attraction and trying to get people inside the building. There was a moment in the design, because, well, when in the school, you always explain the projects in a way that looks like everything is easy. That sounds like, well, these guys had everything in mind since the very beginning, and that's not true. So when we did the competition, we were just, I mean, proposing these nice elevations without any consideration of sound radiation or any consideration of some of the regulations and constraints that we had to achieve. So during the design, I mean, the client told us, well, you have to change the walls, you have to change the openings because you have to block the sunlight in the spring and the summer because the energy consumption inside the building is too high. You're not following whatever label and rules you have to follow. So close the windows somehow. And well, we didn't know how to solve this, really. We started playing with curtains, with louvers, with stores outside the building. We were trying to reduce number of windows in order to justify that we weren't so far of following or getting the code. Really what helped us to solve this topic was coming back to something very similar to the first slide I showed you. I mean, coming back to the essence of this place. We wanted to be part of the landscape. We wanted to solve this building as a part of the landscape. So we thought that, well, maybe there is a chance to filter somehow the sunlight using nature. I mean, we didn't have this in mind when we started designing this, but something that I think it's helpful to you when designing something, when in doubt, just come back to the origin, come back to the beginning of your design, come back to the essence, come back to think about what's important for me in this design, why becoming part of the landscape is the reason to do this, and why not using nature to filter sunlight, why not using plants when during the spring or the summer somehow there is too much radiation inside the building, or why not characterizing the building with this approach, because that would help us somehow to blend as much as possible the building with the landscape, and that was what we had in mind. I'm explaining this topic in this way because of the kind of architects we were, we never expected to do this. If you ask me when doing the competition that we would be investigating about plants in Zurich, we never had this in mind. And this word, unexpected, is another very important word in the things we pursue when we design. We try to find out something unexpected always, not just in our professional career. But when proposing a building, when proposing a design, we try to, rediscover the uniqueness of the places, proposing something unexpected, something that is not standard, something that really drives the design in a way that maybe others couldn't find out. So this idea of working with nature started to characterize this building, which appears in this way. And it appears as a counterbalance to this. I always like to show this slide because this is the highest building in Zurich. And it's not an office building, it's a grain silo. So in Zurich, they are worried about having grain in the middle of the city. And it's a huge concrete tower. And somehow our building is the counterbalance. And somehow the viaduct, the bath area, the material, of course, well, when I look at it, to me, it makes sense. But makes sense from the point of view that all of them are composing a landscape. Of course, I mean, we took the picture being conscious that we want to show this and we want to show this. So everything somehow it's not completely true. I mean, I'm showing you the point of view I want to show you. But just to express you the importance for us, this importance of belong to something when working in a city, belong to something that is much bigger than you. You belong to Zurich, you belong to the city. We didn't understand Zurich. We were worried about understanding this plot. And understanding this plot was about how to deal with the river and how to deal with this landscape. And at the end, how to compose a counterbalance with the grain silo. Then the building is very simple. I mean, building is stepped back into walls. Why? Just because we wanted to propose a nice place on top. We wanted to have a garden where people could rediscover somehow the neighborhood, where kids were playing, where the workers of the offices could have a sandwich, or where the people of the housing could at least not complain because we were blocking their views. So we wanted to propose in a garden where they could at least enjoy the houses that they have. In plan, it's very simple. I mean, at the end, it's just how to activate, for example, this belvedere or this terrace connecting the kindergarten with the offices. This is an office area open towards the terrace, the wardrobes. This is the main hall. This is somehow how the terrace works, how everything tries to relate the spaces with the exterior. This is something interesting. I think it's, the interiors are just always the same material, concrete, thermal concrete, recycled concrete. Well, we can put a lot of adjectives to this concrete. Later, if we have time, we can talk about why concrete nowadays. But the repetition of always the same element, all the same, all different, because nature changes somehow each window, how light changes along the day, and how the spaces, simple spaces as this lobby, can be perceived in many different ways depending of how light enters, how light reflects, or how the season changes. The interior spaces are shaped or developed in the same way. Everything looking simple, everything quite complex. To build in Switzerland is quite complex. Technology makes it really difficult. But trying to transmit the simplicity of being in front of a river and enjoying public building. Focusing about what we thought was the most important here. I mean, this idea of landscape. And using somehow the things that for us were important in this case, that was like in these elevations, this idea of becoming a kind of new viaduct between these three buildings. So these three buildings were more important than us. We wanted to put them all together. We wanted to be the base for them. We wanted to propose a garden where people could gather, and we wanted to fit into this landscape. So context in this case meant that. I wanted to show this building. This is an office building in Germany, in Kiefersfelden. It was a competition too, but it is in fact the first private building we have developed. So it was a challenge for us. So, I mean, well, I told you that we do competitions. So when you do public competitions, you are lucky because your contract is your idea. No, whatever it happens during the process. If somebody argues about the project, you tell him, "Look, I won the competition. This is my board, so you can't change me the design because this is my contract." But when you do a private building, you have no contract. Your contract is just the desire of the client, because the client always tells you, "This is what I want to do, and this is my money." You have, to me, it's even more difficult, I mean, to work for a private client than to work for a public one, because you have no contract. You just have your, let's say, your pedagogy or your charm to convince your clients. No? So our client was this brand, Dynafit. Dynafit is a kind of sports brand. Well, not a kind, it's a sports brand. They are specialized in developing bindings for ski boots and skis, and for people who like going uphill, trekking. Well, it's a quite specialized brand. Kiefersfelden, this is in South Bavaria, not far from, very close to Austria. This, I mean, Mark made me a question during the interview asking about differences between countries and how to approach this German world in terms of design. You know, if that's very different to design in Italy or in Spain or in Switzerland. Maybe we'll talk about it later, but in fact, it's very different because something important to understand is that the meaning of what's an architect in every country is different. In Germany or in Poland, clients don't expect the same from you than in Spain or in France, for example. No? We will talk about it later, but well, let's say that in Germany, they were looking for something that really puts regulations, code, normatives on top of the design. Well, this is Kiefersfelden. I mean, this in between, I mean, this is Austria, this is Germany. This is the highway that connects Italy with Northern Europe. This is Kiefersfelden, again, a river. So this is our context, somehow. This is this highway. This is the river, an artificial canal, let's say. This is our spot here. Here, I mean, we chose this competition because we thought about this, and we thought that would be super nice to do this competition. So we couldn't really evaluate the plot when we submitted the application to the competition. And this is the plot. And the plot finally was a plot in front of a highway. This is an hotel. This is a gas station. And this area is changing a lot now. They are transforming this in an industrial pole. So all what we had in mind when submitting the application, that like kind of beautiful place in front of a river in the south of Germany, somehow disappeared from our minds. And this is what we proposed to the client in this competition. No, this, yeah, again, this is kind of ensemble of two geometric bottoms, these pyramids working together somehow. So why we propose this? Why? It's true that there was a nice or interesting sentence in the brief, which was describing somehow what the client wanted to get, in a way that they wanted to find out something, a design that somehow could represent their values. It was very, very naive. No, we want something that can represent ourselves as a brand related with mountain sports. No, so, well, that's something you have in mind. No, well, they wanted something. I mean, the first approach or something that comes immediately to your mind is, let's do a mountain. They want to see, I mean, this is a private client, he wants to see, I mean, the perfect competition, it would be a competition where you put a mirror in front of the client and the client see himself immediately and says, this is me, this is my building. So we started thinking about this in that way. We thought, okay, let's do a mountain. The plot was quite restricted. I mean, there were a lot of we don't have time to explain all the constraints. There were a lot of constraints. So the plot, even the client discovered that the plot he had was roughly this rectangle here. He didn't have more than this. Or he was not allowed to build beyond somehow this alignment here. So we forced ourselves to think about the plot from a different point of view. We thought, okay, our plot, maybe let's zoom out this place. Let's look at it from the beginning. And it's true that when you look at this place from the beginning, I mean, from the beginning, from our perspective, considering what's a place? A place is something that it has many scales on it. Context is not just about, in this case, or like in Zurich, what really surrounds you. You belong to something much larger. You belong to this landscape. You belong to the river somehow. You belong to the valley. You really need to achieve something that maybe in a landscape that is going to be transformed constantly by others. We need to propose something that could relate the fact that we are in the middle of a valley, in front of a river again, with a highway crossing in front of us, but in front of a river, that could maybe reflect just about that. Of course, transmitting values which can be linked with the firm. No? They had, I mean, this brand is linked with words like technology, speed, you know, people that go up hills for skiing, that do really extreme things. So we wanted to have some kind of language linked with these words because we wanted to be, we want them to be identified with our design. And we proposed this. This that was a shape that had many different reasons because in terms of scale, it was not so clear this was a big building or not. It was a small building. When you approach to the building from the highway, it's difficult to understand what's the scale of this building, how this building appears. Just because, well, we were mixing, understood the volume in two parts. All the uses is the same. I mean, this is all offices. We split the volumes in two sides, trying to find two good orientations for the offices, east and west, and trying to combine them in a way that we could improve the daily life of the people working inside the building, moving around these two orientations from east to west, and trying to play with the scale and with the contrast of the building. And that's why sometimes, I mean, the diagonal cuts the verticality of the building. Sometimes, I mean, the building appears as a sharp edge. Sometimes it's softer, but always related what you have behind you. Always related with this idea of landscape. From outside appears like something monolithic, something like a sculpture. From outside appears too selfish, maybe. No, like, okay, these guys, they like this language, they put it here, they didn't care about what's going on. They just block the views to the people who is working inside. They didn't care because they composed just a kind of nice postcard, no? And that's the risk, because there is some desires to propose this. But the idea was to focus about people working inside this building. We wanted really to translate this idea of landscape within the building. We wanted to propose them a landscape. We wanted to propose a space that could change, could evolve along the day with them, could help them to experience the building as a kind of better environment for working and being in their homes, I mean, alone, a building that could somehow reflect about the brand, but could help them to have a better day life somehow. The building appears monolithic because, of course, we wanted to, it was a glass building, it's an office building. We wanted to deal with energy consumption, solar radiation, technical issues, wind, birds. We wanted to deal in a way that could belong to the essence of the building. We didn't want to put just some screens on top of the building. We didn't want to just hide or change how this building appeared from summer to winter, as we see mostly in the centers of the European cities nowadays. We wanted to propose something that could be understood in terms of facade, in terms of skin, as something that belongs to the design, that can transform somehow how the building explodes inside. From outside the building, it looks like a sculpture. It looks like quite introverted, very monolithic. Inside, when you enter the lobby, you discover how the light reacts, how the reflections of a quite simple building. I mean, it's just, in this case, concrete and glass, how this appears in a way that can be understood as a kind of better environment, if I can use that word, for the daily life of the people working here. And that's why we try to increase this perception of crossing views, a lobby that organizes the movement of everybody, the light filtered by this kind of, let's say, sophisticated facade, in order to achieve, well, some of the elements or some of the ideas that they have in mind. No? I mean, this idea of verticality, this idea of how to work with a kind of technical solution that could be linked with the way they are, how people, and for example, in this case, the shop, which is placed in the ground floor of the building, appears characterizing the building, how the lobby organizes the movement, and yeah, I mean, the way people experiences the building. Is this something that belongs to Kiefersfelden? Is this something that belongs to Germany or to the brand or to Bavaria? I think that it's a building that when you look at it from outside, makes sense within this idea of landscape, proposes something that tries to get something of the brand that we are, which is our client, but beyond that, proposes a way of experiencing this day life of the employees in a way that can be somehow linked with what they with what they do mostly. I think they are people always in constant movement. I mean, the brand is, I mean, the employees, most of them are very young, outdoor people. They are constantly moving. They are going upstairs, downstairs constantly. The spaces are completely open, not just to the exterior, but connecting always the levels in longitudinal way. Somehow they experience the light, they experience the landscape. Why this works in this way? Well, we needed to deal with, again, solar radiation code regulations in Germany. The facade and all the angles are designed in a way that we could fulfill somehow the maximum radiation, and even the shape of the aluminum facade that we have outside help us to deal well with the regulations. So there is a reason for everything, technical reason, but there is a desire for everything here. Again, how to open up as much as we could the view towards the landscape without, I wouldn't say without being a standard, but without transmit a clear intention. Even being an office building, we wanted to transmit a clear intention, how to open up towards the landscape, but without affecting too much this idea of being part of the landscape. The building appears almost as a kind of, I would say, rock or a mineral element, because that was in our minds since the very beginning. The building needs to be something that you could link with that idea. A mineral element put on top of this country field that could be related somehow what we have behind us. I mean, in this case, the German side. and how to use this idea of technology, contrast, light, speedless. I mean, all the words that they were using always when talking to us about their brand, because we wanted to have them identified with the things we did here. So this is context too. I'm going to speed up the lecture, because if not, we are going to be here till 3. The third project is the Abbey Museum in Kortrijk. We won a competition in Belgium in 2020. And we recently, a couple of weeks ago, we opened the building. This competition was a competition to do, in fact, the extension of this abbey. An abbey from the 15th century. So very strong context. A lot of help. When we see this kind of competitions all around Europe, we try to apply these competitions, because we always thought our background is going to help us here, because it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult not having ideas if you have to extend an abbey. You have a lot of help somehow. So this was the remains of the abbey. Well, we were during construction already, but this is the abbey. And they wanted to do, it's not a museum, in fact. It's more a kind of cultural center, or it's a place for open towards, it's more flexible than a museum, let's say that. Kortrijk is in the Flemish part of Belgium, is in northern part of Belgium. A strong sense of identity and strong sense of what it means to belong to a place, let's say that, no? This is how the abbey looks. This is the dormitorium. This is where the former dormitorium of the monks. But this is the kind, I like to show these pictures just to show you the kind of architecture that we were facing to. These vertical elements characterized by steep roofs, this kind of texture in the roofs. Think about Belgium and bricks, roofs. These vertical volumes. No? You don't have bricks here, but in Belgium there are bricks everywhere. No? So it's exactly the same point of view I had when I got to Kortrijk. I didn't know anything about this place. For me, Belgium was about bricks and yeah, probably roofs too. But this is a beautiful park. It was a beautiful park. Well, I hope it's going to be a beautiful park after us too. This kind of small elements, the dormitorium, the chapel, which is behind the dormitorium, the gardens, a wall here. When thinking about the abbey, well, this is the chapel, this is the dormitorium. Here it was the refectorium before. The courtyard was here. We don't have a plan, but it was a sequence of elements. 1 element, 2 elements, 3 elements. The chapel. Before us, there was a wall here. So it was a sequence of elements. What meant to understand the context for us in this case was to follow that logic. We need to add another element. The program was asking to, well, the client had a lot of ambition. They wanted to do, galleries basically, but they wanted to have a lot of square meters in this plot. And most of the times when doing public competitions, it's always in a struggle between the ambition of the client and the reality of the place where you work. No, most of the times they want much more space, much more square meters than the square meters that the site can afford, really. And in this case, it was the same. So we started drawing or sketching just another element, even without knowing how to achieve it. This is something that maybe characterizes the way we work too. We are quite optimistic always. So when we start working, when we start designing, we don't put all the problems up front before we start drawing. We start thinking, what would be the idea for this place? The idea would be maybe just to, with the same logic down the over pieces, to put another piece here, and let's see what happens with the program. Let's see what happens with what comes next? Let's see. Talking with Mark, we used to start designing from outside in our projects. We first look at what's going around, what kind of volume we can propose here. Do we need to be compact? We need to spread the building? Do we need to be more heterogeneous? Do we want to be expressive? Do we want to be more shy? We do this kind of reflections when designing. And when we have a kind of idea, then we enter in the buildings, and then we start thinking about the interiors. This is just the way we do it. I mean, each one has its own process or its own approach. So I'm just explaining this because we did these reflections here. When we started to do these drawings, we didn't have in mind what would happen with the program, what would happen with the galleries, what would happen with everything. But we wanted to recover the idea of the Abbey. Maybe another refectorium, maybe a courtyard, and let's see. So we proposed this volume. We decided to hide the galleries. We decided to reorganize the program and to repurpose the chapel as a gallery. They didn't expect this. We proposed to extend some of the galleries underground. We proposed to reorganize the idea they had about the dormitory. Well, we worked with the program, but we worked with the program because we wanted to get this. We wanted to get an element quite expressive, quite, I would say, with a clear attitude, a clear intention. We wanted to demonstrate we are new. I mean, this is a new piece. We don't want to continue just the language of the Abbey. It's a beautiful building, but we can't do just this in the same way. So we don't want to get something with a nice roof and a nice brick wall. We wanted to propose something that could be linked with that context, with historic context, but that could be read from a different point of view, that could be read, I would say, in a more contemporary way. And that's why, well, the building appears here, characterized in the park. You can look at it from a distance, different angles, following this logic. And here appears this volume, which in fact is a bar, it's a restaurant. It's somehow the element that organizes what's going around it in the garden, that activates the garden, activates the entrance. But we wanted to recover this idea of the refectorium, all together, having lunch or gathering in a common space here. Because again, this idea of the common space in a public building made sense to us. So we wanted to propose a common space for everybody. Even assuming that most of them are not interested in the galleries or in the exhibitions. But probably they will be interested about having a cafe or having something in the bar. So the interventions, yeah, when working in this kind of context, you need to be aware of, I mean, where's the limit, no, of transforming this space. You need to be conscious about, do I add another layer to this volume? Do I change it? Do I keep it untouched? We assume the risk of saying we need to transform it because we just can't keep it as it was, because as it was probably won't work nowadays for the new use. So we started to intervene into the existing beyond adding a new volume, because we wanted to really focus about everything has changed inside. So in certain moments, as everything has changed inside, everything needs to change outside too. We wanted to express that. And sorry, because the pictures are from, I mean, a month before the opening, so are unfinished. But I think are more interesting unfinished than finished, because they talk about how it looks even in this messy way. This is how the building appears. It's something in between a roof and a volume or a building. It's something that you couldn't relate with this, but it feels completely apart too. It's something that expresses some continuity with existing, but tries to propose something different. It's something that can be understood as something that belongs to the context, but at the same time tries to express a certain kind of autonomy. And this is something that we always have in mind too. That would be the ideal for us in every design, how to get something that belongs to a context, but on the other hand, has autonomy, can transmit something by itself, can belong to more places. I mean, the ideal, it's achieve something that can be understood from many, many points of views, even when you don't understand or you don't know the context where it's placed. So somehow when I look to the object as an object, I think that makes sense because transmit something. It's kind of proof, transmit a certain approach to the scale. But within the ensemble, well, I think it works because it makes sense with the roofs, makes sense with colors and textures that we have behind us. This is how it looks. I mean, how in terms of scale, trying to get some transparency through it, connecting both sides of the garden, trying to establish this dialogue with existing some openings, same kind of openings in the existing and in the new volume. Bricks, contemporary bricks, recycled bricks, trying to play with the texture, the brightness, different than the existing ones, just trying to achieve certain difference. And a quite shocking red room inside, not just because we wanted to be fancy or because we wanted to propose something that can be on Instagram rapidly, but because when visiting the site, there was a tower, a former tower. I mean, I showed you a drawing at the very beginning of the conference, of the lecture, but you won't see it probably. There was a small part of the old wall surrounding the chapel, which was characterized by this red tone. So why red? Because it's not just because, well, we wanted to be expressive with the windows and, you know, the contrast between red and green made sense. It's so that when we proposed this competition, before the competition, we went to Mexico and we went to see Barragan's works. And we saw the contrast he was always looking for in their proposals. No, red, green, red, green. When we came to Barcelona, we thought red, green, red, green. We need to do something red. Then we found out in the references and visiting the site that there was something red on this place. We thought, well, maybe it makes sense. Is that too forced? It's an argument. It's an argument that makes sense because, I mean, some of the visitors are going to think, well, the wall was red too. So, well, they did something red inside. So some of them are going to think about it. Some of them, or the majority of them, are not going to think about it. They're going to experience just this red space. Probably they don't like it, but when inside the building, they are going to think, how beautiful is the garden outside this building. And that's it. For me, that's enough. No, we wanted to focus about the garden, so that's enough. So again, there is a desire here. There is an obsession. We went to Mexico. We saw Barragan's work. We thought about why not doing something red like Barragan? Okay, let's try it. We wanted to do something that could enhance somehow the garden and that could make the experience better. We were lucky because, well, this was the persistence inside the chapel. So the chapel was completely a mess. I mean, they had this inside. We just wanted to recover the chapel in the best way. So we proposed them this. I mean, why? Well, we wanted to recover at least the shape in a simple way. I mean, try to simplify the structure. Just put a curtain where, I mean, you can reflect about different layers, lights. We are just another layer, simplify things. I mean, the chapel is more than enough to have a good space. Don't add anything else here. Just one material, the curtain, and that's it. And we followed that logic in all the spaces. This is another gallery in the dormitorium. We try to follow even the same, well, I should explain this. You can argue, okay, that's fine, but in order to get this, you put all the galleries in the basement. So you moved people underground, so you didn't care about them. it's true that we thought that we were composing a good ensemble, mixing, and they wanted to have contemporary galleries. So it made sense to have some galleries with natural light, like in the chapel. Made sense to have contemporary galleries without natural light. They wanted to have blind galleries, so it made sense to put them in the basement, so we could achieve a good ensemble. And we wanted to have a building open towards the garden that could follow the logic of the abbey. So that's why we decided to move some of these rooms to the basement. These are the means we had to use in order to put some of these rooms into the basement. So why did we do just curtains in the chapel? Because or why did we do just, this mortar inside the garden, inside the cafe? Why do put so many constraints in terms of materiality? Because we spent all of the money we had in order to put the galleries. We put in a balance, okay, we are gonna put all our efforts in the basement, we are gonna reduce the means we have above ground, but it's worth to put everything in the basement because that's gonna allow us to have just a simple refectorium in the garden. Quite complex. From an historic point of view, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do. So don't ask me about it. I just think that it worth the final result, but not sure. And that's why I like to show it. It's really a good decision. I'm not sure, but we assume risks. You have to assume risks because at the end it's a personal decision when designing. So we thought that the risk was something that in this case made sense. The connections, between the existing and the new building, how again, geometry, these kind of shapes, we have a kind of language. We can tell that we don't have a language. There are things we like and always appear in the designs. Miami. You can think about, okay, he's talking about context, but he's talking about Europe. Europe, okay, it's almost the same everywhere, same values, same common ground. What happens if you move to another continent or to another place? And we had the chance this wasn't a competition, literally, this was a selection process in Miami. They selected us as architects. This date is wrong. This is on hold, this project, so we don't know what's going to happen. Because we are here, we don't know what's going to happen. I think it's the more, if you ask an architect about their lives, because most of you are students, if you ask me about something that really you have in mind every single day of your life is, I don't know what's going to happen. So you need to think about it after your studies. You don't know what's going to happen, but that's going to happen during your entire life. You don't know what's going to happen, in this case, with this project. We thought that Miami was the Atlantic Ocean, the beach, palm trees, beautiful shore with hotels and clubs. And our client had a plot in this neighborhood. This neighborhood is called Little Haiti, where the immigrants coming from Haiti are somehow, it's a kind of ghetto, let's say that. So quite hard. Train tracks here. And this is the plot. And well, in fact, this is the plot. This is the kind of context that we had. This is Miami, in fact. This is Miami. So this is the context. And I showed these pictures because it's quite important. This is the context. This kind of simple architectures. These are warehouses. This is our property. This is our neighbor. This kind of simple volumes, warehouses. So when start designing, we didn't know exactly how to. You approach the design with all your words, values, things in mind. trying to address the design in a coherent way, you know? I mean, we had the freedom here to do whatever, literally whatever we wanted, because the client had the rights to build up to, I think it was 15 stories. And literally we could fill completely the footprint, 100%. The occupancy, the ratio of occupancy was 100%. So 100% of in footprint, 15 stories. That was what they call the real estate. But the real estate of this place was that. Something unbelievable about this project is that it was a program. So I think that if we are able to build this project, and if the project succeeds, it's not about the architect, it's about the guy who wrote the program, really, because he described the program in a way that was super nice. I mean, we wanted to, we had to do 20 studios for artists. This belongs to a foundation, a non-profit foundation. It's called Ulight. So basically they do, I mean, they run a program of fellowships where they promote artists who want to become professionals. So they allow them to have all the facilities, studio, the materials they use in order to become professionals. So the program was the description of what do you need to become a professional. I mean, you need a studio, you need a library, you need a kitchen, you need a small gallery to show your works. You need probably a couple, I mean, in this case, a couple of classrooms where you can teach kids to what's art and why it's important and make some money with the classes. And a small theater because the director was interested about movie making and a small theater. And they wanted to have a place where people could gather with the artists because they want the artists to sell artworks, because the way Ulight makes money is buying some of the artists' works before they become professionals. And if they become professionals, they already have an artwork, so they can sell it and make more money. So it's always about business. No? So they wanted to have a place where people can see the artworks and can gather with the artists and understanding what it means to be an artist or whatever. So the way it was, I mean, I explain it very badly, but the way they described this was very nice. It was like in a small village devoted to art, no, like in a small ensemble of small things. They use always this word, in a small studio, in a small whatever. So, and we were in Miami, so literally, I mean, I like to show this sketch because within this neighborhood, which literally, I mean, it's going to change, but nowadays it's very hard. You don't expect that. So we had this idea of this tropical place, sorry. I mean, and we wanted to reintroduce this idea into our thing because we wanted to build our thing. So basically, the design recovers this idea of retropicalize this space. Let's do a garden. Let's do an oasis in this place. This space is a nightmare. I mean, we are not in Miami just to do a 15-story building with glass because they understand that the vernacular material that we had to use was glass. We had to do something different. So we convinced them after a long process that they needed to do something different. And we proposed them a place. They needed to have a place. They needed to have a garden. They needed to have a space that could link the life of the artists in their daily lives, could help the people from the neighborhood to run some activities, to see what's an artist, what are they doing in this building, to help the artists to sell some of their artworks, and to basically characterize a place in a way that could be linked somehow with existing. I mean, if you see, well, these were the models that we started testing. Well, you see these elements, these vertical elements, and these volumes just defined by one story. If you think about the warehouses we saw at the very beginning when approaching the site, we had these one-story buildings in front of us, very simple. Somehow the context was very, very simple in terms of architecture. When thinking about how to characterize something so simple, we thought about, let's think about natural light. I mean, an artist studio is about how to introduce light, northern light, how to propose in a space with good proportions, the right scale, natural light, open to a garden, somehow we have a narrative if we follow that line. So we try to follow that narrative, trying to get a place that could somehow being open towards the garden, protected from the neighborhoods, because the neighborhood, it's quite hard somehow. You can't open up the windows towards the exterior because you need to be protected from the exterior somehow. We wanted to have a low building, which could fit well with the surrounding, very expressive again. I mean, it's not a public building, but it's a building devoted to art. So we wanted to be expressive. We wanted to characterize the building somehow. There's something I didn't tell you. I mean, the artists, they need to make their lives by day, so they used to work by night. Because, well, I mean, it's very expensive to have your own life in Miami, so we wanted to characterize, I mean, these spaces with these towers for the daily life. I mean, introducing northern light, we wanted to characterize somehow the building during the night, depending on who was occupying each studio. So we put a lot of towers characterizing this volume. Again, a repetition of elements. We were in front of the train tracks. When you are in front of a train track, you immediately think about rhythms, paces, repetition of elements, simple elements. And we proposed them this, which I like to show this picture, well, this render, because somehow this is what we thought it was Miami. This is what we proposed. There is some kind of, unconsciously, I think we were repeating somehow what we had in mind. And I show it because unconsciously, you are going to repeat almost always the same ideas you even don't know you have in all your designs. So that's why it's very important to keep your mind as active as possible as many times as you can, because whatever you read, see, study, listen, is going to appear somehow during the coming decades. So unconsciously, this happened here, which is an ensemble of elements, vertical elements, following the same logic of the surroundings, these simple structures, following somehow the logic of the train tracks, characterizing each room with light, with northern light. When we showed this to the client made two objections. The first one was, it's fine. I mean, it looks like a mosque. Somebody told us it looks like a mosque. There are too many towers. So remove half of the towers because it's too expensive. And then what's going to happen with the graffitis? This is what they told us. They were right with the graffitis. In fact, later we changed the material. I mean, in fact, now it's not concrete, it's mortar because of the graffitis. And we didn't want to remove the towers. And we didn't have an argument for that. We didn't have an answer for that. So when we came back to Barcelona, we started to think about our towers. And now in the render, you see that there are towers facing north. There are towers which are not facing north. And this is because we needed to have a narrative for these elements. We needed to have an argument for this. So, and this introduces another issue. We thought about why not trying to improve the environment where we are. I mean, let's talk about sustainability. It was not in our initial thoughts using the word sustainability as something that could address the design. I mean, they didn't care about sustainability in Miami. I mean, you think about Miami, it's all glass in a tropical weather, climate. Nobody cares about it. So we thought, okay, let's try to understand the towers as elements that could help the users to have a better comfort, to speed up air, basically, to have weed catchers or solar chimneys or water tanks or something that helps the users to enhance somehow their spaces. It is something rooted with the design. At the beginning, it wasn't rooted with the design. It was something that we used as an argument. We struggled to find a way to express it, to explain it, that, as something that could belong to the design. Because we understood that that was the only way to convince the client you can't remove them. You can't remove every single tower, because this tower is a solar chimney. So this is going to speed up the air in your studio. So the guy in this studio is going to feel better because you need to deal with humidity. And when you have humidity, the only way to deal with that is to speed up the air, to put a fan or to open up the windows or to do something that makes you feel better. So they understood that. They didn't care about energy consumption, but they understood that, okay, there is a way to make our artists to feel better. So we developed somehow the towers in a way that could convince them to do not remove them, and could at least to characterize still the design, and well, renouncing to some spaces to the northern light, but on the other hand, to help us to deal with this idea of how to improve the environment, which at the end was something that made the design much better. And because what we wanted to have was, of course, a garden and a space that could be understood and could be felt in a better way. Always looking for this kind of contrast, nature, architecture, abstraction, again, concrete. At this point, they told us to remove the concrete because of the graffiti. So we thought, okay, we don't care, remove the concrete. We can do this just with blocks, concrete blocks, and we paint them, and that's it. And you know, when you have that freedom, when you get to a point where you don't care about the material you use, we always joke at the office, we know we have a good pride. When you have the freedom to renounce to the material, for example, then you know that your idea is strong enough to support whatever change they ask for. So when they ask for removing the concrete, remove them. Do you want to remove one tower? Okay, remove them. I don't mind if this is one or this one. Don't remove half of them. But you know, at least this is what we describe of the essence of the project. I mean, the project needs to be strong enough to support these kind of changes, because a lot of changes are going to happen during the process. Well, more interior views, the garden, the interior space. Before entering into the studios, there is a sequence, I mean, a small public space. You enter into your studio like a monk, a contemporary monk, open towards the garden, nature. The window is a kind of display to show your artworks, the gallery, and by night, how the building changes depending on who is working in each studio. So the landscape changes. As the landscape in the towers of Miami Beach are constantly changing depending on who is occupying the flats. So somehow, something unexpected, but something rooted or something linked with this context. And the final one, okay? I have 15 minutes yet. We did a competition for the extension of the Gothenburg Museum, and rapidly, well, this is Gothenburg. Maybe this sounds to you familiar because, well, huge axis. At the end of the axis, the Swedish, they needed to do something. So they put a museum, the opera, and the theater, all the same square. And this was an intervention they did for the Universal Exhibition 1929, 1925. They did this. This is the Fine Arts Museum in Gothenburg. And we had to do the extension of this. But this building is listed, so really our chances to do something in this side were zero. I mean, we couldn't do something to change this. Very positive building. So when looking at this building, you immediately know that you can't compete against it. No, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, well, you could put something on top, maybe. Like if you was Swiss, no, I mean, you put a glass thing on top, and maybe that could transform it. But it was really difficult. And then the brief described that you couldn't do it because you can change this postcard somehow. This building is quite uncomfortable. I mean, because the galleries, the gallery level starts here. So if you visit the museum, you need to go up 6 floors. So it's really challenging to visit this museum. It's super important. I mean, for us, it's fundamental to visit all the places where we work, because you discover these kind of stupid things. No? I mean, it was so tiring to visit this museum that I think that unconsciously we tried to solve this problem in the easiest way. We didn't want to go upstairs anymore. I mean, we had to find a way to propose just 1 story level, and that's it. I mean, because people are going to really get it's going to hate this building. So I'm joking, but when visiting the site, you discover things you don't expect. Even if you don't know Gothenburg or you don't know Sweden, we saw this building, which was characterized by these kind of rooms. I mean, very eclectic, a romantic building, let's say. And this is somehow the south side. This is our plot, in fact. And there is something I didn't explain well. I mean, originally, the Swedes, they ran out of money when doing this building, so they just built half of the building. So the building had a symmetric side towards south. So it was a kind of classic structure with a courtyard in the middle. So originally we could occupy these plots, but during the last decades, they were doing extensions, very weird extensions towards west. But well, I mean, now they assume that, okay, you can occupy the south side. We took this picture, we saw this, but we didn't pay attention to these rocks. So this is one of the extensions from the 80s. There is another extension from the 60s that we had to keep. We had to keep this extension, but we could remove this one. We did some sketches. Most of the sketches we show in the lectures are sketches that we do after the lecture, after winning the competition. So, but I like to show the sketch because somehow shows a very simple building here, almost like a ship, with something here. I mean, something weird here. A couple of openings and something here on top that probably, I mean, the older ones in the room, I mean, they think about labyrinths or they think about, yeah, skylights or whatever. So we proposed this. We literally wanted to solve the building in the easiest way. I mean, we wanted to propose, I mean, the program was asking for gallery space. The main part of the program was asking for 1,500 square meters of gallery space, and then all the facilities the museum needs to run the logistics of the museum. So the total intervention is around 5,000 square meters, but mostly the main part is 1,500 square meters for the galleries. So we decided to, we had the chance to reach this level. I mean, instead of competing with existing, instead of doing something that could be somehow read as a counterbalance with this building, we thought, okay, we are doing the extension. There is a winner. I mean, the existing is the winner. You can't compete against it. Let's try to extend it in a way that we make the movement and we understand the movement throughout the museum. We improve it, at least we improve it. We don't want people going upstairs 6 floors here and then crossing towards the side and going again upstairs and over 6 floors, and then going downstairs and crossing both buildings. We wanted to have an experience that could be as comfortable as possible because this is a public building. And we did it in this way, this low element trying to disappear, not just because we were so respectful somehow. We wanted to have a narrative, again, an history. And our history was like, really this hill, because this is a hill, this is a rock hill. So literally we were building on top of a rock. And that's why there are these kind of elements, these rocks, that are somehow characterizing the site, along this side here and along this side here. So we wanted to have a building that could be really linked with, not just with the respect to the existing, but the respect to the essence of this site, which was this rock nature somehow. We wanted to have a contrast between the abstraction of this volume and the rocks, between what means nature that was before us and the new volume. And then having a respectful relationship with the existing, trying to introduce natural light from the south in the galleries in the existing, trying to protect the new galleries in this site, trying to find a logic for the logistic, and trying to characterize the building somehow. Let's make a joke in a Swedish way. I mean, somehow in a kind of labyrinth way, or a kind of trying to point out certain spaces in order to achieve a kind of expressiveness. We were quite influenced by Miami, so we wanted to propose something that could be linked somehow with Miami too, because we like that. I mean, you work by phases too, and sometimes you run out of ideas too when working in your office. So we thought, okay, why not using the same kind of logic? No, a vertical element, a monolith, marking up our moment here, the rocks, the existing, the extension, the neighbors, as small as possible so the neighbors couldn't complain. In fact, sometimes I think we won because none of them complained. And just, well, connecting the building, I mean, this is the existing building. No, people need to go upstairs still here to see the galleries. So we just wanted to make their life easier. I mean, going till this level, extending this level, trying to activate these galleries, just a single room, 1,500 square meters, and light, natural lights, trying to activate the access, as soon as possible with artworks. We couldn't intervene in the existing, but transforming somehow the fact of going upstairs in an art moment somehow with some installation here, and the idea that light is characterizing again the material, the space, the dimensions, following the same logic, geometry as a rule, as a guide, imposing ourselves the same limits, trying to deal well with existing, and a space in between. And a space in between, kind of event space, where people can put both in relationship, where people can think about the existing and extension, when people can link both moments, similar, but different, trying to work on continuity with existing. And in fact, this is what we have tried to do in all our buildings till now. Not sure about what's going to happen in the next years, but I'm sure that it's going to be a kind of continuous discourse about the same thing. Thank you.